are posting the link to the report. We'll go ahead and get started. Hey, thanks everybody so much for joining us for the annual report. Happy New Year. This is the first time that we get to say Happy New Year, as we've all been waiting for the end of 2020. And it is exciting to be kicking off 2021 in such a fun way. We've never done an annual impact report of any kind before. We've certainly loved having the conference, and in part, probably missing last year's conference was, at least in part, part of the inspiration for trying to gather everyone together and report back on what everybody's doing. Liz Johnston and Jackie English from our team get total credit for having this idea and seeing it through to fruition. I'm just the lucky one who gets to present it, and it really is a privilege. It's a fun report. Part of the purpose of putting it together was to give you all, as implementers, something to be able to look at and be proud of your accomplishments. We do have some awards this year, and we thought that by highlighting and celebrating some of the work that is being accomplished across the community, that it would give everybody a chance to be in awe and be awe-inspired by what's being done, kind of put a flag out there as something that we should all aspire to, and inspire us all to just keep on growing and evolving. So we hope that it is that for you, and something that you could feel free to share with your staff and your elected officials. And we hope to do more of these as 2022 kicks around ultimately. But as Liz just posted, please download the link, and you'll find also a very cool digital representation of the report. I'm going to go through just a little bit of background and stage setting, and then the rest of the presentation is really meant to describe the report and get into each of the sections overall. As I was preparing for this, I was thinking back, heading into 2020 from 2019. Man, it had been so long since we had to use priority-based budgeting or any of the programmatic-based business intelligence in any sort of budget-cutting way. That was like the old days. That was 2008, thinking back on Great Recession. All of the years for probably the last decade heading into 2020 were more on how are communities freeing up resources, applying the blueprint, and funding these great, ambitious results of the future, providing for healthier communities, economic opportunity, and prosperity. That was our speech at the National League of Cities Conference at the end of 2019. All of these things were so exciting to see the use and application of PBB. But sure enough, as we all know, I don't have to replay in any more time than what's necessary what took place in 2020. But we had to shift gears, to say the least. And you all know what took place from the slides that you see in retrospect here, but from Corona to increasing equity, the climate change impacts that we saw across the Pacific Northwest, increased issues with what is happening with an unequal economic recovery and increased homelessness and food banks, streets that still need to be repaired, election challenges, and cybersecurity issues, among a million other things. We all very well remember 2020. But I bring this up because it was extremely interesting to us, watching and being part of the changes that were taking place in 2020, that the skill sets that we saw being applied to address all of these challenges were interestingly not unlike the same skill sets that we needed pre-COVID. In that previous slide I was just showing, in order to free up resources to fund the outcomes that we were interested in 2019. And that was really, it hit us in the face. And it's something really important that is the bedrock of what you'll see in the annual report overall. We had communities like Washington County looking at how to be able to fund a new need for polling workers when their normal staffing from seniors and volunteers weren't necessarily all that eager to show up and be physically near one another in a high vulnerability class of people. In order to come up with new resources to fund those positions, they had to reallocate from the positions that they already had. So here, once again, we had this focus on reallocation. We had Boise, Idaho, and Chloe Ross using their program inventory data to systematically go through and identify, of all of the things that they do, what are they going to deem essential? And once they could identify their essential services, they could then use their program costing data to identify the personnel attached to those essential services. And therefore, they had their list of essential personnel, which also gave them the list by default of non-essential personnel who were literally up for grabs for reallocation towards other new needs that needed attention. And we all have these new needs across the board. So what was kind of mesmerizing to see again and again was you all affording new outcomes when you weren't being bailed out by and large, when you didn't have an influx of new resources, which sure would have been nice, and an overall feeling of sure, budget crisis, but we're getting the job done undeterred by a lack of resources. And it's nothing short of inspirational. And you'll see in our report, once again, a reiteration and a reflection on our vision, which is, first off, to have met you all, you being the change agents who we refer to, and all of this work fundamentally to empower change agents to be ambitious as you tackle new results, society's biggest challenges, as you see on the screen here, right in our face, unencumbered by resource scarcity. And so a simple reflection that the same skill set was required pre-COVID as was required in the midst of COVID, and we'll talk about the future and our belief in subscribing to the very same skill set to be mastered. And so that to say that the annual report is a focus on this skill set is absolutely what we're trying to do, and also to begin to highlight some of the stories of you all, the organizations who are demonstrating proficiency and mastery in achieving and applying these skill sets and showing how it's done, in hopes that everybody can celebrate and be inspired, and that's the spirit of the annual report overall. So I've got mine here, I've printed it out, and we'll go through a little bit piece by piece. What you'll see in the intro section, pages 4 through 12, Mike and I have an opportunity to provide a little bit of an address overall. We have a reminder of why we're here, and sometimes this is really important to be able to refresh our memory and share with our elected officials, share with ourselves, but maybe stated for the first time in such a comprehensive way, and a reminder of why we're doing this work. We do get into an explanation again of those levels of mastery from the beginning, the foundational data creation level, and being able to talk in programs, to shift the conversation from line items to the programs that we provide, and actually just having program data to be able to deploy. I mean, think about Boise. Had they not had their program inventory and program costing data, they would have come up with some solution to their continuity of operations plan, but having that data allowed them to pursue it with a strategy that is unavailable to organizations who only have line item data. We graduate into resource reallocation, resource repurposing, and maximizing incoming new entrepreneurial streams of revenue. And that skill set we focus a lot on because it is the adjacent possible for all of us. Once you create your data, then we need to be able to start to demonstrate how we can reallocate resources and get better and better at that. Moving into the third realm, the question becomes, well, why and how much should we be able to reallocate? And the only possible answer to that is, what are you trying to fund? And so fueling resources towards the results of tomorrow is that third level of mastery and that skill set that we will highlight in this report, those who are tackling that. And then you can imagine reaching a point where you have optimized all you possibly can. You've reallocated from your own resource base from low priority to high priority, from programs that could achieve efficiency or be provided with a partnership in a different way, where there's no better choice to make. Your trade-offs internally don't get you any further. You're simply taking money from one really high priority realm and putting it towards another. And that's where we get to that fourth top level, which is regional optimization, looking beyond the confines of our own local government and tapping into the resource base of other organizations, nonprofits, local government, even the private sector, who are similarly inclined to pursue results like you. And this is the body of work. These represent the skills that we are trying to master. And so in the report, we get into this, and these are indeed the case studies around which we have awards to present today. But I mentioned the adjacent possible, from simply having program data to this area beginning to demonstrate resource reallocation. And you'll see in the opening pages that we have a 2019 to 2020 scoreboard of organizations and what we're able to see within the tools, their programmatic resource reallocation. For any of you who came to our 2019 conference, seems so long ago, in Denver, you'll remember that we highlighted the first 5 organizations we'd ever tried to actually verify and measure, are they making progress in reallocation? And these 5 were honored because of being able to look through their data and see that they had achieved 10% resource reallocation from their efforts in using programmatic data from year to year. But what's been really fascinating, you see here, I mean, multi-million-dollar programmatic change, multi-million-dollar resource reallocation. And for many of you, we've had discussions about this specific data and what it means. And we recognize full well that for some organizations, as we'll highlight in the awards, this has been done very intentionally. You're looking at the programmatic data from your departments and intentionally making allocations to increase certain services by finding efficiencies in others, and that reallocation is done with intent. And that is the real key to all of this work. We've heard from other organizations who, while you see this data, it's not terribly clear in your mind if the departments are doing this intentionally. Are they just shifting resources from program A to program B, and they're not giving it the thoughtful intention that we really want to see as a skill set to be mastered? And certainly, maybe if they are doing it intentionally, there's no intermediary, there's no decision point where you all, as super users, as leadership in your organization, are there to say, hey, you found this opportunity to decrease service levels and free up some money. Pause for a second before you reallocate those resources, because as an organization, we have a lot of needs for where those resources need to go. And so for other organizations, this verification process, we'll get to Littleton and Fort Sask in particular, you're doing it, you have your own process to verify that these program changes are taking place, whereas for some of you, it's like a forensic analysis to even confirm, did this program really grow, or did we just rearrange the data? And we're bullish at ResourceX on making improvements. We're going to demonstrate here in a little bit some of the enhancements in our own software that we want to bring to the table to eliminate this as a barrier. We want this to be celebrated. We want the whole community to move towards multi-million-dollar resource reallocation. It's extremely important, and therefore we want to make sure that the tools that you have to demonstrate this type of reallocation give you intentional reallocation, verifiable, accurate data that you can totally celebrate. But regardless, this is a pretty meaningful chart in the grand scheme of things. So In the report, we also say, well, why? And our title is Who Cares About 10% Reallocation? Does it matter? And we use an example, and it's not a random example. It's the way that one of our newest clients, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, sees the world. It's the way that Ann Arbor might be pursuing some of their climate action plans, and we'll get to them in just a moment as well. But the idea of promoting or celebrating some level of resource reallocation kind of goes like this, and I thought this might be helpful in the report. You take an issue, a massive societal challenge, as we mentioned in our vision statement, like climate change, and you can go online and look this up. There have been numerous efforts to try to put a price tag on what it might cost to simply flatten the curve on making climate change any worse than it is right now, and maybe that's somewhere around 300 billion. And solving climate change altogether might be something around 3.8 trillion worldwide. But there are smarter people out there who are doing these types of calculations. And you say, well, how can we as local government even take a swing at that? Our point at ResourceX is that if you don't, there's not other organizations who are waiting in line to take up this type of challenge. There are certain challenges that are truly up to us, up to you all, to be able to amass the resources and actually pursue, because if you don't, I don't know what the consequences are of that, but it's not something that we want to face. So you could look across our own country at state and local government spending in the United States in this particular example, and say all state and local annual spending operational budgets come to about, $3 trillion overall. And if you ran some basic calculations on what 5% of 3 trillion could look like, or 10% of state and local government spending, you see the charts of what we might be able to drum up to redirect towards pursuing these types of challenges. And those numbers start to get pretty big, but you start to realize in order to solve, amass 300 billion or 3.8 trillion, we need to be able to generate these types of resources if they're not coming from somewhere else. And then ultimately, what might it take to reallocate upwards of $1 trillion? And then you start to really, back of the napkin wise, have a calculation on what's necessary to tackle these types of wicked problems. And the point here being, this can be doable. We all have just done it because we had to begin to fight COVID or address reimagining public safety in certain areas. What happens if we start to get really good at this with intention? Might we be able to generate the type of resources that we really want to in order to pursue these massive problems? And that's what's supposed to be inspirational, is that we're on our way. We're showing evidence that it's possible. We have some communities doing it intentionally. Let's accelerate this and see what we can really do if this is a skill set that we can actually master. And so that brings us to kind of where we are in our role in ResourceX. We were created as an organization to try to get this data together in the first place. It took us a long time to get a repeatable practice, to get recognition as a best practice from the industry, ICMA, GFOA, and so on. It took us a long time to move from this point where just implementing PBB was the point, moving off of that to say, no, taking action on the data is the point. You implement in order to have this information in order to make these tremendous positive improvements. And in 2019, as I mentioned, was like a groundbreaking moment just to say, I think we're starting to gather this evidence. Maybe we can push mastery. What we're bullish about and not afraid to share with you right now is we recognize we have constantly needed to evolve and improve our own game. We've brought the tools to a certain level, but we want to really make the tools easier for you to be able to document and verify that type of reallocation is occurring, so that you can see it with your departments and you can report on it. You can celebrate your successes and you push those resources towards the future results that you're looking to achieve. And so one of our major announcements in the annual report is, since last October, I believe we kicked off. We are building our next generation of the online PBB platform, and it's extremely exciting. We have a product roadmap that at least gets us through the end of this year, with the overall goals of modernized user experience, making data creation, program inventory, costing, scoring, more intuitive, easier for you and for your departments overall. And then most of all, pushing into this insights and action area where we can really start to push the how we're doing reallocation and being able to track that overall. So thrilled about this. We're going to actually announce and present this at our ResourceX annual summit, which we're also announcing today, will take place virtually. And these are, talk to Liz, these are highly probable dates, September 22nd through September 24th. It's a virtual summit. We're going to try to stick to it, but this will be our grand unveiling. Many of you will probably hear about this along the way throughout the year as we gear up towards September, but that's the big date. So that's where we're headed overall. And that is the beginning of the report. So we move into, I'll get my notes here. The bulk of the report, pages 14 through 23, are a reiteration of these 4 levels of mastery and what we're really trying to create in terms of the skill sets: getting your programmatic data, reallocation and maximization, fueling resources towards the results of tomorrow, and regional optimization. It gives you something to aim for as well. In this section, we have highlighted 5 case studies, and there are probably more, but these really stand out to us and embody what we're really hoping more organizations will accomplish. So I'll hit them level by level. And the first one comes from the city of Fort Saskatchewan, Alberta. It's in the Edmonton metropolitan area, if you are unfamiliar with it. And this first level in purple is all about programmatic communication, making the data more accessible and accountable. And what Fort Sask did, and you can go online and check this out. I'm not sure if we have the link to it. John, Shannon, or Marley, if you have the link handy, maybe post it in the chat for others to see. We've certainly posted about this on our blog, but make sure that you get a chance to look at Fort Sask's budget. What you see are traditional line item changes, but what John Vance and Shannon and Marley moved towards, which we had not seen before, was program by program reports about change. And not just from a resource perspective. So I took a screen capture here from Public Works, but you can see this for every department. You can see all of the programs in their Public Works inventory, from cemetery operations to snow removal to events and festivals. You can see the year-to-year variance and the year-to-year recommended change, or most recently approved change. And then you also see a description underneath, thanks a lot, Liz, of the rationale behind the change. And just think about how different this is in the budget book from line item changes, which are what draws everybody's attention, certainly our elected officials, and becomes the topic for debate. We had another organization who did not do this recently. They had their programmatic data. They presented their budget with their line item changes overall and walked right into City Council saying, I see the line item changes. We've just gone through COVID. They're substantial. We get it. But what is the impact to the services that we're actually providing? And Fort Sask, I think this is their second year where they've attempted to put programmatic data as the headline story, and line item data is the backup. It's in the back of the book. But to the point that I was just making a few minutes ago about being intentional, Fort Sask is being super intentional about the resource changes at a program level. And these are the programs that need to go up, that need more resources. Here are programs that their revenues are in jeopardy because of impacts from COVID and other things going on. Their intentionality is very well appreciated and very well done. Shannon, I took this quote from what you had begun to reflect on with us, that council's discussion revolved around programs and not the line item detail. So I think for everybody, being able to see this, go to their budget document and see expression of programmatic change, the focus of the discussion with council at a program level, making this data accessible. This is just a phenomenal story. And so congratulations, Fort SAS, for your Resource Excellence Award in what we call communication, accessibility, and accountability at the program level. Our next exploration or excellence award, that is, goes to the city of Littleton, Colorado. And this is in the area of, again, intentional resource reallocation and maximization. For anybody who has been following the city of Littleton story, they presented in 2019 at our annual conference where they were just starting to use and apply the PBB blueprint. And they had developed their data, they had their programmatic data, they understood the blueprint. Hey, this makes sense. You can generate new resources. These are programmatic opportunities. We can free up and reallocate resources from programs that meet these criteria, all for the hopes of funding new unfunded needs on the left side of the blueprint. I think everybody understands the blueprint fairly well, but there is a nice section in the annual report to try to provide some content behind it. Well, we highlight Littleton this year because they went one step further. Oh, sorry, in 2019, we recognized them and highlighted their story because they used a toe in the water introductory technique called, hey, departments, pick three programs and apply a blueprint related programmatic opportunity. I think actually departments picked two and the city manager picked the third one overall. It's a great first effort to get everyone used to how to communicate the intention, the future direction of every program being provided. And this is a level of mastery that we really want to see. We want to see all programs ultimately with a designated future. What is the future direction of every program that requires resources in your organization, at least per the blueprint futures as we've outlined overall. This go around, again, if we're able to post Littleton's budget, this is all documented in their budget document. They had highlight programs again, where according to the opportunity areas on the blueprint, you can see the checks indicating by program and with a description with a variance or a resource allocation implication. Where are they going next with the program? Is it a decreased service level? Is it a program elimination recommendation? Are there outsourcing or partnership opportunities that they are trying to highlight? Is there an efficiency? This is just off the charts. It really moved us to see a very simple portrayal and organization of the data back to what we're trying to do in our own rebuild of online PBB. This is the type of visualization and reporting that makes it very easy for decision makers, elected officials, department heads to communicate and understand what are the changes being recommended. And you can debate this. So we have Stacey Covington on for a resource exchange podcast that's on our website as well, where she talked a lot about exactly what they've done here. But thanks a lot, Liz. Please go and check out their budget and see exactly how they're reporting and achieving this type of resource reallocation and maximization. Very well done. In the same category, resource reallocation and maximization, and these stories they're so awesome. I could talk the rest of the day on these, but I'm happy that we at least get to highlight 5. But Washington County, Wisconsin is no stranger to excellence in everything that they do in the priority-based budgeting realm. In fact, I don't know if everybody knows this, but we hired Brad Steckert from Washington County, who was a big part of their team, with apologies to Washington County for taking one of their star players, but with the overall truth that by bringing Brad to our team, we could take the Washington County experience and bring it to everybody. That's what we really wanted to do. But we point your attention to Washington County because of their parks division. And as far as the best way I can tell this story is that approximately 3 years ago, this is their third year implementing this business plan, and we're going to have Jamie Ludovic. I just heard this from Liz. Hopefully participating in a Resource Exchange podcast in March. I believe this is coming up. But the situation in Washington County, conservative county, Board of County Commissioners definitely concerned about economic future overall in the county, realizing there's not an influx of never-ending resources, came up with the idea after they had done their prioritization that parks amenities didn't necessarily fall into their charter. It's not identified at a high level in the results or definitions, and posed the question, because they were subsidizing and using property tax mill levy resources that could be reallocated, they posed the question, what if we just got out of the business? That's a fair question to ask. And the ramification would have been, okay, we're going to sell the parks or develop the land or let somebody else take them over. And instead, Josh Showman, Jamie Ludovic, Margie, Brad, Aaron, their whole team are responsible for seeing through a multi-year plan where the Parks Division was nearly 100% funded by subsidy. And over the course of the last 3 years through, as you see here in their report, park user fees, revenue generating and enhancing activities, sponsorships and naming rights, partnerships overall. Basically, in how I see this, is applying every single category of the blueprint. They have managed in their 2021 budget is what I'm highlighting down below. Thanks, Aaron, for sharing kind of advanced copy so I could get this section. That the 2021 budget represents the first year in which the parks maintenance and operations will be off the levy. So you go from totally subsidized to financially independent. And this story is really staggering as you start to think about, wow, for all of our departments, libraries, parks, even our internal services, where it's unclear what their future looks like. They're not the highlight services that always have first priority when it comes to resource allocation. How can you take control of your own destiny, become financially independent from dependence on general government resources, to go from totally subsidized to not subsidized at all is just a remarkable story. So congratulations, Washington County, and we're so happy to share what you've achieved. Ann Arbor, Michigan is one of our newest organizations who has completed all of their work, and it was facing this question that many of you face when you implement and you have your program inventory, your costs, your scores, and your prioritization for the first time, and you're kind of looking towards, okay, where do we go next with this? We had been really ramping up the work around insights. And so in discussion with Tom Crawford and Kim Busmeyer from Ann Arbor, they have a host of unfunded needs, just like any of us. Here I'm drawing attention to their climate plan, their climate action plan, but this was but one of numerous areas, COVID recovery, and a host of other initiatives that required resources overall. Applying insights towards an outcome, Ann Arbor has just become one of the first organizations to be extremely intentional about how can we free up as much as possible of our resources to fuel towards these future results. And we think that what Ann Arbor has done is so impressive because it was done in the middle of COVID, when so many of our organizations have pulled the reins and tried to slow down because we are facing massive budget shortfalls. Ann Arbor is saying, well, it's inappropriate to hit the pause button on something so important as our climate action plan. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania is trying to follow the Ann Arbor model right now. Ann Arbor became one of the first organizations to go through Eric Keck and Mike Siemens' approach to what could we do, what should we do, and what will we do to develop and take action on program insights, all of which pertain to the blueprint. and all are geared towards an outcome. So we've learned a ton from this experience. This is the first cut for Ann Arbor to go through this particular insight workshop. And again, refusing to hit the pause button on funding things that are very important, even right in the middle of a budget crisis brought on by a once in a generation, hopefully, pandemic, is just something that we're extremely impressed with. And we applaud City of Ann Arbor with the Resource Excellence Award. And finally, last but not least, you think towards the highest level of attainment, and that comes when you realize that your own organization only has so much resources. You can reallocate from within and try to fund answers to your climate action plan like we just saw for Ann Arbor. But there may come a point where your trade-offs, you don't have that many left over. And at that point, the next logical place to go, sooner or later, is to look at other organizations with resources and start to figure out how can we partner? How can we let other entities take over if they're equipped to do so for certain programs that we are used to providing, if that means that we can free up those resources and reallocate them to other things. And that's exactly what the City of South Jordan has done. And again, another organization that's no stranger to excellence in PBB, but we draw specific attention to their partnership with Salt Lake County, which, as we understand, has been years in the making, or at least talked about for quite some time. But being able to have the county take over for the Fitness and Aquatics Center transition, allowing South Jordan to take those resources and reallocate. Interesting, another park story is very impressive, and thank you, Katie and Don, for being part of the call. We have a paper coming out with GFOA coming out here soon in 2021 about government as a platform, and the whole premise is really pursuing networked enterprises, is GFOA's term, but partnerships at a high level. I wish we had the South Jordan story to incorporate into that paper, but it embodies all of the future that we're talking about for shared services and regionalization. So congratulations, South Jordan, on your Resource Excellence Award. So hope everybody is as moved as we've been. We share all these stories internally. If you have stories that we don't know about, please let us know. That's yet another area of the tools that we would love to work on, is how we capture the real stories behind the numbers when you're making programmatic change. But here's our applause icon for all of the award winners this year in Resource Excellence. And thank you very much for being part of this. I'll move quickly through the next section, but underlying all of these ways to apply the data, which is what we've just talked about, is the basic fact that you have to have data to begin with. So you can't be a master of reallocation if we don't have programmatic data to start that conversation. So we have a lengthy section in the report, which we think that you will also find intriguing, just about the stats behind all of the data, program inventory, program costs, scores, and setting the stage for insights. So this is us. This is our community overall by organization size and region. You can start to see budget size, just some basic data overall. Many of your organizations, as we know, get asked, who else is implementing this? Where are they? Are there any small organizations? Are there any large organizations? So we were trying to provide some of that basic background data, and also some of the stats that, with some beautiful pictures throughout, that there are 61 active organizations who are in the tools and using the data. I believe we're over 250 lifetime, but remember, the vast majority of our work came pre-online tools. So all of what we're representing are those who have data in the database. And of those 6143 organizations are applying their program-based business intelligence in the budget process. Also really fascinating to know that not everybody uses this for budgeting. We learned that from City of St. Albert last year, or 2019, that just having program-based business intelligence informs discussions around rates and fees, around partnership opportunities overall. Budgeting is but one application of all of this work, but it is not the only application. So that's why we've drawn a distinction. We try to clarify that in the report about, if you've heard us use PBBI, program-based business intelligence, that's the data itself that you create. If you use that data in budgeting, that is priority-based budgeting. I will hit this next section, but just a reminder that as we talk about data creation, we have used this metaphor of creating data layers that we believe we are recentering the conversation from the traditional line item resource data, slipping in a program inventory, attaching and then giving meaning to your line item data as it is associated with the program inventory, because now we know how much every program costs, and then learning a bunch of other stuff about each and every program. Is it mandated, degree of reliance, those basic program attributes that we know, overall impact on outcomes, the future direction of every program overall. These are collectible data layers, and with more connected data layers, the better your insights on the data in order to be able to take action. This is our overall theory of how all of this comes together, whether or not your desire for taking action is reallocating resources, or it's approving a budget, or it's pursuing equity, whatever the case might be. This is our overall path. So you're going to see us in the report break out each section and try to give some updates and some highlights around each of those data layers overall. So we have, this is kind of just fascinating, 18,276 total number of community-oriented programs in the database. We have 8,428 governance programs overall. And you can start to see the breakout of number of programs and their overall percent of the total program inventory across the community. We have broken out first years from second years or third years, who you know to be as renewing organizations, just so you can start to see some of the basic trends on what basic department areas or outcome areas grow as they reconsider their program inventories and shift things around, and which areas shrink from the programmatic standpoint. And these categories over here more or less line up with departments, but as you know, not every organization is organized the exact same way. So we have some generalities around public safety, economic development, infrastructure, public works. So they're pretty broad, but hopefully specific enough so that you can start to see some of those trends overall. On the community side, we've broken out number of programs from first years to renewing organizations in a bar chart, just so you can see total number of programs as opposed to overall percentage of program inventory. Not surprising here to see so many public safety programs identified on average in a first year organization, and that drops. Infrastructure and public works, quality of life, some of our parks department areas. Overall, the trend tends to be that first year program inventories are larger than renewing years. And that is just a helpful hint to be able to bring toward your departments as they look to refine some of their work. Many of you know this to be true. And we have the same type of data on the governance side as far as program inventory. So just wanted to show you some of the trends that you're going to see in the report. And undoubtedly, we're trying to provide a lot of data. You might come up with some other epiphanies or some takeaways or some questions even, and please share those with us. We'd love to see if you're seeing something interesting jump out at you in the data. Moving into the cost allocation component, so program costing, we have $6.2 billion allocated towards programs within the database in 2020, and that is up from $4.2 billion in 2019. So that's really cool to us, just to see the growth of organizations who are participating and sharing their program costs. At some point down the road in our product roadmap as well, we would love to be able to have easier access to the data for those types of trends that you're seeing in the annual report and analysis that we often talk about. So we have some breakdowns from personnel and non-personnel as well. If you're doing some quick math towards that earlier puzzle that we had, we had to fund somewhere around $3 trillion in or 300 billion in climate change costs. If we all were able to dedicate a reallocation of 10% of our entire resources allocated in 2020, that gets us somewhere far in that pursuit. We have a breakout of the types of results that communities are identifying. Average numbers, 6 for community, 6 for governance. I think you'll find it interesting, especially for those of you who are going through a redo of your strategic plan. I know Battle Creek is on the line as well. We've had new results emerging like diversity, equity, and inclusive prosperity in that area. That's been really fascinating. We've always had safety, economy, infrastructure. We have more focus on the environment than we've had in the past, and health and growth. Governance results are down here as well. But these are interesting to be able to share and say, this is what cities are pursuing. These are the types of results that we're trying to align our resources to achieve from a trend among the organizations, the preeminent organizations who are doing priority-based budgeting across the country. And so I revisit the data, insight, action, and we have about 12 minutes left in this presentation. I will wrap up here towards closing comments here pretty soon. But I wanted to draw your attention that in this path, it makes total sense. We're going to create data that we haven't had before, a program inventory. We're going to attach it to our line items and have program costs. We're going to align programs or evaluate them, score them relative to outcomes that we're trying to achieve. And some of you have actually gone as far as to put program metrics together. We have the data creation component of this. We can always get it faster, always make it easier. But this has become very clear over the years. And we now see what mastery can look like from an action perspective when you are reallocating resources like Littleton, and you're communicating programmatic data like Fort Sask, and you have Washington County in their entrepreneurial ways, and you have South Jordan's regionalism and Ann Arbor fueling resources towards results. We know what success looks like. The path between data creation and repeatable mastery is of infinite interest to us at ResourceX, and it has been for a very long time. I picked this out for Eric Keck and Mike Seaman. We were having a discussion yesterday. This is 2016 on our old blog. And you see a note talking about the evolution of our work back then. 2016, it's like 5 years ago. ResourceX was created to dramatically reduce the time an organization spends implementing PBB, which is totally referring to the data creation, and enabling leaders to shift their focus to using PBB data to make change. This is, in concept, this has been very clear to us for some period of time that the promised land is not data creation. The real meaning of doing any of this work is to get towards actionable outcomes. So that was back in 2016. We created the blueprint in 2017 or 2018 to really try to get specific about what types of insights are we looking for? What types of program trajectories are we hoping to identify? And some of you joined us in the middle of this, so you never knew there was a time before when we didn't have the blueprint. And the blueprint has really helped to simplify the types of programmatic actions that we're looking for. Last year, I don't know if Salem's on the call, but for the first time we had insight workshops, and Mike had built into the tools, the platform itself, how to tag a program with an insight. So it wasn't just something that needed to take place outside of the tools. So you could drill into partnerships and you can see each department and the programs that they had identified. But even this, as much of a quantum leap as this was a great way to start off with what could we do? Here are a host of potential ideas should we need them. But it's, and Denver, City and County of Denver this year was the first organization to really be super focused on the outcome they're trying to achieve. In their case, increasing equity by definition at the program level, and using insights to advance that objective, tagging each program with an insight on how it can change to improve equity. And that was eye-opening because it doesn't always have to be about resource reallocation or maximization. It's what is the goal? How can this program change to meet that goal? And then let's come back and revisit the resource implications. And that has been huge. So we've been on this path for quite some time and really want to make some headway. And the insight workshops close out the report in the annual report because it's our most fertile ground. St. Albert, Alberta has done a lot of groundbreaking work in their approach to insights. They've now gone through it twice and they probably have a third time coming up. You can imagine doing multiple rounds of insights per program, depending on the outcome you're trying to achieve. You'd have different insights if your outcome is we need to free up money to fund our climate action plan, like Ann Arbor, than you would if your focus, your objective was we have a new multi-million-dollar budget shortfall to address. We need new insights on what we can do to achieve that objective, or we really want to pursue equity. I know Kirsten is on the line or was on the line from ELGL, and we have a cohort coming up about how we can achieve sustainability and also invite discussions of equity as a specific outcome for which we're going to use programmatic data to develop insights to achieve. And there's a nice outline of the process that Eric Keck is leading communities through about what could we do, maximizing the wide universe of things that you could do at a programmatic level, narrowing it down to what should we do, and finally getting to, okay, what would you actually recommend in the near term to achieve this objective? It's been a fantastic process. And again, we just hope to continue to get better at getting you actionable recommendations, getting them plugged into the online platform to make this really easy, and taking the best of what we're learning from mastery level organizations in the community and baking in their experiences into our tools overall. So that is what closes the report, is a focus on insights in the tools and actions and the latest approach. So I'll wrap it up here. We do have a closing comment, and the closing comment borrows a little bit from probability theory and this idea of branching probability streams. And the point that I want to make is it's because of your hard work that we are pushing towards the right end goal, the right probability that we want to see take shape, is that organizations master all of those levels. And if they do, we have a far better chance that organizations will not be defeated by this feeling of scarcity. And instead we'll recognize, nope, these tools are doable. I know how to reallocate resources. I know how to identify the outcomes I'm trying to achieve and push resources there. I know how to look for regional partners. I'm not afraid of that. And if that happens, then we can truly face something quite opposite of scarcity, which is the feeling of at least practical abundance to pursue the kind of results that we really need to do. And if you think about this branch as, I don't know where we all jumped on board here, but there's a lot of work that preceded ours. Andrew Klein's on the call, and we both got involved because we were infatuated with reinventing government and the price of government and budgeting for outcomes. And Fort Collins, Colorado, and Baltimore, because they did budgeting for outcomes, we were on a probability stream that was different than had these things not occurred. And this was a prosperous stream. We had Center for Priority-Based Budgeting that came about. Walnut Creek implements, they're one of the first ones. Mike Seaman writes online priority-based budgeting. For all of these reasons, these are efforts that kept us on the right path. We had our first 5 organizations to accomplish 10% reallocation. We had the birth of program insight workshops. Those help us stay on the right path overall and not get on a branch of some other outcome that we don't want. Government as a platform paper is coming up, and that is going to educate and excite people about the idea of partnerships. Washington County is a huge story in the government as a platform paper. And then, sometime down the road, we're hoping that we have more Fort Saffs and Littletons and Washington Counties and Ann Arbors and South Jordans to be celebrated, but that it becomes not extraordinary, but actually ordinary, that everybody has mastered these skills. And if we do that, we have our business plan is trying to get to 500 plus implementers within the next 5 years. We have a lot of ideas in the hopper for our product roadmap, including a program mapping platform to make partnerships far easier overall. But we end up in what I presented in 2019 as the ultimate vision, which is we don't miss out on tackling society's biggest challenges because we didn't have the solutions. And it's doable, and you're doing it. And that's what's so exciting, and that's the whole point of the report. There are a ton of risks, ways that we get off track, and that is, if we don't succeed, who else fills that void? Is it the private sector? Do they take on for certain services? And that's a probability that could come to light. We could lose because of the barrier of complacency overtakes ambition in the public sector. You would hate to see it, but man, times are tough out there in the public sector, and it's hard to be ambitious. You have cultural barriers that could totally win out, and people who put their stake in the ground and say we won't change, and we could lose to that. Or the ResourceX apparel business takes over. We get really excited about that. We have hoodies and t-shirts for the first time, and I was excited about that for Christmas. But these are risks, and we're trying to eliminate these risks, and that is the focus that we have in our product, in learning from you, in interviews, what we will be rolling out, at least as our next generation set of tools at the annual summit in September, and try to keep everybody on path towards accelerating and evolving and growing together as a community. And with 2 minutes left, that is the wrap for this annual report. I just want to end and again say thank you so much to Liz Johnston and Jackie English for putting this together. It took a lot of work, and we really hope that you enjoy it. We welcome your feedback on things that we might do differently for a future annual report. But overall, just wanted to end with such a positive celebratory note of you're doing great work, and it's hard, but keep it up because it's worth it. And that's all. Thank you so much. I don't know if anybody had any additional desire to stick around or talk, or you're welcome to. We will, but overall the presentation's over, and congratulations to everybody who has an award and is recognized as well.
Thank you, Chris.